Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Lennart Elfgren and I'm a senior professor at Luleå University of Technology. This presentation was prepared in collaboration with Stig Bernander, who has been engaged and designed major civil engineering works, working together with Skanska, a major Swedish contractor. He has also been engaged as an adjunct professor at Luleå University of Technology. During the last 40 years, he has worked with the analysis of landslides. We are happy to share this pre-recorded presentation with you, and I hope that at the end I will be able to be online and answer any questions you might have. The contents of the presentation is we start with a background and discuss possible instability of the North Spur, reports written by Stig Bernander, a report written by a geotechnical peer review panel, and finally the conclusions. And the main conclusion we have is that the stability of the North Spur is not established. It may very well fall down. And there has been to be a proper investigation of the stability. And if it's not stable, it has to be stabilized. Here is a short video clip where Stig Bernander and I are discussing. He was approached by Cabot Martin when he was at a landslide workshop in Quebec in 2013, and Cabot Martin asked him if he wanted to look into the stability of the North Spur. And he said that that might be an interesting thing to do. So the next year he went there. Here we see a picture of the Ice Age and the last glaciation 10,000 years ago, when we had a 3 to 4 kilometer thick ice layer that pressed down the surface of the Earth. And you can see to the right there is Canada and North America, and I also marked Muskrat Falls. And if you look to the left, there is Europe and Asia. And there is also Luleå marked at the upper part of Sweden. And here you can see what part that were ice covered during the summer and during the winter. And we had a thick ice layer both in Scandinavia and in Labrador. And Muskrat Falls was formed by this ice age. And as you know, the idea to build a power plant has been around for a long time. And the prerequisites for this building is that the soil in Labrador, it was deposited in the sea after the last ice age, and the Earth's surface has then rebounded above the sea level. And then the Churchill River has successively eroded its way down, and the slopes are highly susceptible to landslides. And the North Spur is a ridge composed of many layers of silty sands and lean, silty, sandy clays. And these soils, they are vulnerable to softening and liquefaction when they are disturbed. Here is a picture of a slide in 2014 on the north bank of Lower Churchill River, midway between Muskrat Falls and Goose Bay. And you can see the river in the front and how the slide has worked itself backwards, upwards into the slope of the river, the dam bank, the river bank. Here is another picture from 2010 from Edward Island, where we have a slide midway between Muskrat Falls and Gull Island. And also here you can see the river in the front and how the landslide has worked itself way upwards into the dam bank gradually, a progressive slide. Here a picture from October 2014 when Stig Bernander visited the North Spur. And here you can also see the appearance of the soil. It looks rather sandy and silty, and there may be some clay into it too. This is the problem. Here is an aerial view of the Muskrat Falls and the North Spur. And what we fear can happen here is that when the water rises in the dam, then there will be a major pressure indicated by the red arrows here on the North Spur. And if the soil in the spur isn't strong enough, it may well happen that all the spur slides down into the right end downstream area of the river. There are two types of progressive failures. The first one, A, on the top of the picture, is called a flow slide or a backward slide or an upward progressive slide. And they are common in Canada and in the Churchill River Valley. And they start at the right where the river erodes into the river bank. And then there can be that a part of the bank will become unstable and slides down into the river. Then the next part of the dam bank, river bank, will be unstable. And there can be successive slides as you see here in the picture. The other kind of progressive failure is B in the bottom of the figure. It's called forward or downhill progressive. It's not so common in Canada, it's very common in Scandinavia. And here you see that the failure starts to the left in the top of the slope, and then it works its way downward. There it can be initiated by a load that hasn't been there before, for example, a temporary filling, piling, or as in our case, the rising water of the dam that gives a very high horizontal force. And if the soil along the failure surface cannot take this force, then the soil will fail and it will start to slide. And in this case, it starts in the upper part where the force is active. And if the soil cannot take it, then the failure progresses successively downwards to the other end. These pictures are taken from an article from a paper by Adrian Luca from 2011 from the Canadian Geotechnical Journal. There is also another paper written by Stig Bernander from 2016 on downhill progressive landslides, and we will now see an video abstract of it. You have summarized it in a doctoral thesis, and now it's also summarized in this paper.
Yeah. Yes.
Can you highlight the most important conclusion in the paper?
Progressive landslide analysis explains how and why it can actually happen that a long natural slope which has remained stable for centuries or even millennia can be destabilized by seemingly small additional loads from, for instance, local fills, local vibratory or piling activity. The analysis also clearly explains why downhill landslides tend to spread over vast areas of more or less horizontal ground beyond the foot of the slope, showing that already before passive resistance is reached, a failure surface measuring hundreds of meters may have developed deep under the surface of the level ground. The finite difference model has been applied to a number of Scandinavian landslides and at least one in Canada. In the article, 3 case studies are briefly discussed. Briefly speaking, the model is a finite difference approach where the downhill axial deformation due to the additional load is maintained compatible all the time with deviatory deformations in the highly sheared zone near the failure surface. Software and spreadsheets are introduced as well as recent developments. Progressive failure analysis invalidates the use of classic limit equilibrium approach in long slopes with sensitive clay.
Here you see photos of the co-authors of the paper. There are Anders Bullingsjö, Anders Jylland, Per-Evert Bengtsson, Roland Busch, Ben Knutsson, Jan Olofsson, and myself. Here is a slide where you can see the consistency of the soil. It was prepared by Cabot Martin, and he made a companion of lots of geotechnical data, and it can be found on the web on the link that is given here. So, as I mentioned, Stig Bernander was approached in 2013 by Cabot Martin, and he went to visit Churchill River in October 2014, and he made visit by air, car, boat, as well as on foot. And he wrote reports on the stability of the North Spur during the following years. He also initiated a Master of Science thesis by Robert in 2017, which was also presented at the workshop in Trondheim. And all the reports may be downloaded from this link. Here is the first report written in 2015 after his first visit. And then he made some further comments on that and on the later reports. Then in 2016 he made a third report where he really looked into the problems, and he also proposed some methods to stabilize the ridge if it wasn't good enough as it was. Then in 2017 we have here the thesis, the master thesis by Robin Jury, which was presented at a workshop in Trondheim. And here we have some posters from this workshop. Then last year Stig Bernander wrote a summing up of the North Spur issues, and then he and me summarized all the reports in this technical report from the University of Technology. And then this summer we prepare this response and comments to the Geotechnical peer review panel. And in this report we also have a preface by two professors in soil mechanics and foundation engineering in Sweden, Jan Laue and Sven Knutsson. There are two methods for analysis of slides, and they will be illustrated here. But if we start at the upper right corner, you can see there is originally a rectangle, and then it's forced by two shearing forces, two green arrows at the top and bottom, and these deforms the rectangle, so it turns into a ellipsoid. It turns into a skew figure where you see the shear forces and the deformation gamma to the vertical axis. And in the diagram in the center, you can see the relationship between these shear forces tau on the vertical axis and the deformation on the horizontal axis. And if we start at 0 in the lower left corner, the relationship in the beginning is straight, it's linear, then it starts to curve, and it has a maximum about 30 kilopascal, and then it starts to soften. It can take lesser and lesser stresses the more it's deformed, and finally gets a residual value that here is about half the maximum value, but it can also be much lower if it is a weak soil. So this is the softening behavior. Then the traditional limit equilibrium method, LEM, used by Nalker-Lavalin, they assumes the strengths to remain constant after deformation. That is the blue dotted line. And that is the same that is used when you are studying metals. That is an ideal plastic behavior, and it's very easy to make calculations because they are linear. But now then it has been found that you can take into consideration the softening behavior. You get quite other results, and that is the red line, and that is how it should be done nowadays. Here is a slide showing the variation of the soil properties in the North Spur. And again, we have the stresses tau at the vertical axis, and we have a blue curve, which is a good soil, which has a maximum capacity of about 135 kilopascal. And then the residual value can be some 62.5 or 3.75 kilopascal. But then there are also weak soils, the red one, and you see that it's only 1/3 to 1/4 of the good soil. And the problem is that there are material with these properties in the North Ridge, according to the investigations that Nalker-Lavalin has made. And if we find a lens with these properties, which is in a critical section, then it may start a failure. So here is an overview of the North Spur from 2017. It's upstream, and you can see the work that has been done to prevent erosion on the North Spur slopes, and that is to prevent these backward slopes, this failure that progressively eats itself into the slope. Here is a section through this upstream section of the ridge, and you can see it in the left end, in the bottom there, you can see the present level of the water. It's about 17 meters according to the scale that is to the right of the picture. Then the water will rise due to the dam, and it will rise to 39 meters, and that will mean an increase of 22 meters. And that will cause a major horizontal load on the ridge, which is indicated by the blue triangle to the left, and also by the thick red arrow marked with an N. That is the load that the ridge now has to take when the water is there. And the question is, how can the ridge take up this load? And we have studied different slip surfaces, and one of them is indicated with red dotted line. And the slip surface is inclined, so it goes down to the water level downstream of the ridge. And you can see that there are green small arrows indicating the shear stress that the soil may take under the slip surface. And if the concentrated load N is so large that these green stresses there cannot take up the force, then the slide will fail there and it will start to subside. And then the force must be taken further down the slope, and then the shear forces there will be increased. And if we have a lens with weak material in this slip surface, then we will have a failure. And then the failure will progressive further down, and then it will end up everything in the downstream area of the river. So here is another picture of this erosion protection work on the upstream side, and a possible downstream progressive failures indicated with the red arrow. If we look at the ridge from downstream, we see here that there's a lot of work being done to protect the ridge from erosion and to protect it from backward slides that eat themselves backwards into the slope. And the Nalco leveling has made a lot of work to protect the ridge from this kind of erosion. But the kind of progressive forward, downward failure that we are talking about here, they haven't done anything for them to prevent. So they appointed a geotechnical peer review panel to look into and discuss the findings that Stig Bernander has written about in his reports. And in the introduction to their report, they say that it is based on information made available to the geotechnical peer review panel by SNC-Lavalin and the client. The GPRP has not performed any calculation by themselves, not anything, in order to verify the accuracy, completeness, or validity of the results obtained by the SLI. So, the opinion of the geotechnical peer review panel is solely based on the review of data made available to them and concept and methods made available to them by SNA and the client. So, we think that the aim and scope of this geotechnical peer review panel report seem to have been to just justify that Nalco-Leveling has made an acceptable job. However, Nalco-Leveling has only used old standard methods and not used the methods that had been derived during the last 50 years. And that is very human, that to rely on old results, but in a case like this, you have to look at what is happening, how can you better understand a slide like this. And finally, the geotechnical peer review panel only discusses Stig Bernander's earlier reports and not the latest ones. So our response to and comments on the GPRP report is that it does not investigate the most critical failure surface. And it does not give any information on the deformation properties of the soils. So it cannot properly evaluate the stability of the North Spur, because you have to know the deformation properties to be able to make any analysis that is worth the name. And our investigative calculations, where we had assumed deformation properties from other landslides, indicate a safety that is less than 1. That is, according to them, the North Spur will fail. So our final conclusion is that as neither Nalco-Leveling nor the GPRP has managed to make a proper failure analysis, an independent committee of experts appointed by government should analyze the stability of the North Spur. And if they should find that the stability is not good enough, Stig Bernander has proposed 2 means to stabilize it: by compacting it or by injecting it with the injection graft. And with that, I conclude this presentation, and I hope to be able to be with you online to answer any questions you have. Thank you very much.